My name is Margaret Wilson. I'm 67 years old, a widow, and a mother who thought she knew her daughter better than anyone in the world. For years, Emily was my pride and joy, the child I worked double shifts for, the reason I saved every penny, the light that carried me through the darkness after my husband passed away. When she and her husband David suggested moving in to take better care of me, I welcomed the idea with open arms. I thought it meant security, love, and family support in the last chapter of my life. But lately, I had been feeling something was wrong. Small things, subtle looks between them, conversations that stopped the second I walked into the room. So when the security cameras around the house broke down, I felt exposed. I called a technician and had them quietly repaired, but I never told Emily or David. It seemed unnecessary at the time. Then, one quiet afternoon, I decided to test the system. I opened the app on my phone, not expecting anything more than a grainy image of an empty living room. Instead, what I saw froze my blood. And within 10 minutes, a horrifying truth would shatter everything I thought I knew about my own daughter. I remember staring at my phone, the little spinning circle on the screen as the camera connected. My hands trembled slightly, part nerves, part age, but mostly the kind of anticipation you feel when you're not sure you want to know the answer. Then, with a soft click, the image cleared, sharp and alive. There, in my own living room, sat Emily and David. They weren't cuddled on the couch watching TV, or laughing over coffee the way young couples should be. No. They were hunched over the coffee table, a storm of papers scattered across its surface like debris after a hurricane. My heart skipped. Those papers looked familiar. Too familiar. Emily, my only daughter, the baby I once swaddled in pink blankets, leaned forward with a pen in her hand. Her voice was low, but the camera's audio picked it up clearly. "She won't even notice, David," she whispered. David, tall and broad-shouldered, the man who had promised to love and protect my daughter, gave a humorless laugh. "Margaret's too trusting. As long as we put everything back, she'll never know we were here." My throat closed. What did he mean by never know? Why were they rifling through my things? I leaned closer to the screen as Emily pulled out a manila folder. The one from my bedroom desk. The one I had locked away. How? I remembered locking that drawer myself. I always kept important documents, the Remy will, bank records, and the deed to the house I had bought with 30 years of sweat as a nurse. That deed was my safety, my legacy for Emily. I thought I was protecting her future. I never dreamed I would be protecting myself from her. Emily flipped through the pages like someone searching for treasure. "Where's the original?" she asked, her voice sharper now. David rubbed his temple impatiently. "Albert said we need the original deed. Copies won't do. If this is going to work, we have to have it." Albert. The name hit me like ice water down my spine. I knew that name. He was some shady lawyer David had introduced at a family barbecue months ago. I remember feeling uneasy about his slick grin, his way of watching me like I was a lamb in a pen. I had dismissed it back then, telling myself not to be paranoid. But now was part of whatever this was. Emily shook her head, flipping another page. "It has to be here. Mom keeps everything obsessively organized. Remember what I told you? She labels, files, locks everything. She's practically a walking archive." The word obsessive stung, not because it was wrong but because of the contempt dripping from her tone. The same carefulness she once praised me for was now ammunition in their scheme. David leaned back, exhaling sharply. "We don't have time for this," he said Friday. "Without the deed, there's no way he can finish the job." Emily's hand froze on a page. "Look," she whispered. She held it up to the light streaming in from the window. "The appraisal. $500,000. Can you imagine?" Albert was right. This house is worth every bit of the trouble. $500,000. I covered my mouth to muffle the cry rising in my throat. My home. The place where Emily took her first steps, where I cooked Christmas dinners, where I prayed for her future. Reduced to numbers on a page, a payday to cash in. Then I heard the words that made my knees weaken. Once we get this transferred, Emily said calmly, we can sell and move her into something smaller. A one-bedroom apartment will be enough for her last years. Her last years. It was as if my daughter had buried me alive with those 3 words. I sat frozen in my kitchen chair, watching the screen as though it were a horror movie I couldn't turn off. My own flesh and blood was planning to strip me of my home, of my dignity, of the life I had built brick by brick. David pushed his chair back suddenly. Check the bedroom. Maybe she has a safe box. I switched to the second camera feed. My stomach twisted as I watched him storm into my bedroom, yanking open drawers, tossing aside folded clothes, muttering curses when he found nothing. The invasion was unbearable. Me private sanctuary treated like a crime scene by the man who once toasted me at Thanksgiving. He came back with nothing but frustration in his eyes. Emily crossed her arms, tapping her foot impatiently. Albert gave us until Friday. That's 2 days. If we don't have it, we're done. And I am not going back to living on scraps. Scraps. My voice cracked aloud though no one could hear me. The $700 a month I gave them from my pension, the groceries I paid for, the roof I let them share, all scraps to her. David slumped into my favorite armchair, the very one where Emily used to curl up in her pajamas as a teenager. We'll just pressure her, he said coldly. Tell her it's insurance paperwork. Something urgent. She's been forgetting things lately. She'll sign without a clue. Forgetting things. Yes, I misplaced names sometimes, or dates. Normal slips of age. But now I realized, they were turning those moments into a narrative. A story of confusion. A weapon against me. I felt the blood drain from my face. For a moment, I wanted to shut the app, throw the phone, pretend none of it was real. But I couldn't. My daughter and son-in-law weren't just careless. They were plotting. Scheming. And I had stumbled onto the proof. 10 minutes, that's all it had been since I opened the app. 10 minutes, and my entire world had collapsed. And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. I sat frozen at my kitchen table, my phone trembling in my hands as the camera feed carried every word into my ears. My heart pounded so loudly I worried it might drown out their voices, but no very syllable came through, sharp, merciless, undeniable. Emily slammed the folder shut with a frustrated sigh. It has to be here somewhere. Mom can't have hidden it too far. She's meticulous, yes, but she's predictable. She always keeps the most important things close. David rubbed his jaw, pacing across the living room rug like a caged animal. Albert warned us this wouldn't be easy. He said your mother has a reputation for being thorough. The way he said thorough made it sound like a curse, not a quality. Emily shot him a glare. Don't you dare blame me for this. We agreed. We need the deed. Without it, we're stuck here living on the crumbs she gives us. Crumbs. Crumbs. Again that word. My generosity, my sacrifices, boiled down to nothing more than scraps in their eyes. David stopped pacing and leaned over the table, lowering his voice as though the walls themselves might overhear. Listen, Albert doesn't just forge documents out of thin air. He needs the original to replicate the signatures, the notary stamps, the seals. Without it, even his contacts at the registry can't push it through. If we don't deliver by Friday, he walks away, and then what? We're back to square one. Emily's eyes flickered with panic before hardening again. No. We can't fail. This house is our ticket. Do you realize what $500,000 could do for us? For our future. For the children we want someday. Children. She had dangled the promise of grandchildren in front of me for years, making me dream of little feet running across these floors again. Now she was weaponizing that dream against me, justifying betrayal in the name of a future that erased me entirely. David softened his tone, almost coaxing. Then we push her. We've been planting the seeds already, haven't we? Telling her she's been forgetful. Acting concerned about her confusion. She's doubting herself more and more. All it takes is a little pressure. We present the papers, tell her it's for medical insurance or updating her will, and she'll sign. She won't even read it. I bit my lips so hard I tasted blood. They were rehearsing manipulation like actors preparing for a stage play. And the role they had written for me was the senile old woman, blind and compliant. Emily shook her head slowly, though not out of doubt, out of calculation. What if she gets suspicious? What if she reads too much? Mom's not stupid, David. She taught me to pay attention to the fine print. She drilled responsibility into me my whole life. What if some part of that still lives in her? For a flicker of a moment, I saw the daughter I had raised in her words, the one who once stayed up late balancing a pretend checkbook I made for her, who beamed with pride when I told her she was smart enough to handle anything. But then David smirked, and the shadow of that daughter vanished. What's she going to do? He scoffed. Call the police on her own daughter? On her only family? Besides, Albert assured me that once the transfer is done, it's irreversible. Even if she finds out, it'll be too late. Emily hesitated, biting her nail. Then, slowly, she smiled. A small, cruel curve of her lips that made my stomach twist. Perfect. Then tomorrow we'll bring her the papers. We'll tell her it's urgent. And once she signs, it's done. I pressed my palm to my chest, trying to steady the frantic beating of my heart. My own child was plotting to trick me into signing away my life. The betrayal cut deeper than anything I had ever known, deeper than losing my husband, deeper than the long nights I spent alone working to provide. This wasn't just disloyalty. This was war. The two of them began to stack the documents, but not carefully. They left them in disarray, unlike the neat order I had always maintained. It was as though they didn't even care if I noticed, as if my attention to detail had already been erased by the story they were spinning about me losing my mind. Then, something happened that made my breath catch. David paused before leaving the room, his eyes lifting toward the corner of the ceiling. Toward the camera. I froze, convinced he had seen me watching. My hand hovered over the phone, ready to slam it shut, but he only frowned thoughtfully. Then he shook his head and muttered, "I wish we didn't have to do this." My heart lurched. Was that regret? Was there still a part of him, a part of Emily, that could be reached? Emily's answer dashed that hope. She strode toward him, placed a hand on his shoulder, and said softly, "Think about our future. Think about freedom. Do you want to be tied down to an old woman who'll drag us down until her last breath? Or do you want to finally live?" David closed his eyes, exhaled, and when he opened them again, the regret was gone. Replaced by cold resolve. "You're right. It's time to think about us." They left the living room, their voices fading down the hall. I sat there in my kitchen, staring at the silent screen, tears blurring the image until all I could see was a smear of color. 10 minutes had become an eternity. And yet, deep down, I knew the nightmare had only just begun. Because tomorrow, they would bring me those papers. And tomorrow, they expected me to destroy myself with my own signature. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in my bed staring at the ceiling fan as it turned slowly, casting long shadows across the room. Every creak of the house, every gust of wind rattling the window, sounded like Emily's footsteps outside my door. My mind kept replaying their words, like a cruel tape stuck on repeat. "She's been forgetting things lately, she'll sign without a clue. Once we move her into something smaller enough for her last years." My daughter's voice, Emily's voice, pierced me in a way no knife could. I closed my eyes and let memories come, uninvited but relentless. I saw Emily at 5 years old, running into my arms with her report card, proud of her gold stars. I remembered staying up until 2 in the morning sewing her Halloween costume, even though I had a 12-hour nursing shift the next day. I remembered holding her hand as we walked to school, her tiny fingers gripping mine with trust, with love. And now those same fingers had been flipping through my private papers, searching for the deed to sell the very roof over my head. I turned onto my side and buried my face in the pillow, muffling the sobs that threatened to choke me. I had raised her alone after her father passed. I had worked doubles, sacrificed vacations, skipped meals to make sure she had what she needed. I had told myself it was worth it because she would grow up to be strong, kind, honorable. But sitting there in the dark, I realized something chilling. The lessons I taught her, responsibility, attention to detail, persistence, she was now twisting against me. My meticulous organization made it easier for her to know where to look. My habit of labeling files meant she didn't even need to read carefully to find the deed. My age, my occasional forgetfulness, had become the cracks in my armor she intended to pry open. It felt like my entire motherhood had been turned into a weapon against me. By morning, my body ached with exhaustion, but my mind was sharp, alive in a way I hadn't felt in years. Fear had a way of waking you up. When Emily came into the kitchen with her usual, "Good morning, Mom," I forced a smile, stirring oatmeal on the stove as though my world hadn't just crumbled. She kissed my cheek lightly, and I felt ice instead of warmth. David followed behind her, his voice artificially cheerful. "Smells good. You're spoiling us again." Spoiling them. I almost laughed at the absurdity. Spoiling the same two people who had just plotted to take everything from me. I watched them sit at the table, bickering softly about groceries, about bills, about David's supposed job interviews. The scene was so ordinary it almost tricked me into forgetting. But I wasn't forgetting. Not anymore. I excused myself, saying I wanted to check on the laundry. Instead, I locked myself in my bedroom and opened the camera app again. I watched them through the hidden lens in the living room. The moment I was gone, their voices dropped. "We can't delay anymore," David muttered. "Albert's expecting us. If she doesn't sign by tomorrow, we're finished." Emily tapped her nails against the table. "She will. She's old. She trusts me. She always has." The word struck me harder than I expected. She was right. I had always trusted her. Blindly. Completely. Because she was my daughter. Because I thought blood meant loyalty. But now, staring at the small screen, I knew the truth: blood could also mean betrayal. I shut the app and pressed the phone to my chest. My pulse thundered in my ears, but a strange calm began to form beneath the panic. I could crumble under this, or I could fight. I was still Margaret Wilson. I had survived widowhood, years of exhaustion, nights of loneliness. I could survive this. For the first time in weeks, I thought clearly. I needed to turn their scheme against them. They wanted me confused. I would play the role. They wanted me compliant. I would nod and smile. But behind their backs, I would gather proof. Every word, every plan, every cruel whisper about my last years would become ammunition. That afternoon, when Emily came into my room holding a laundry basket, she asked sweetly, "Mom, have you seen that folder with the house papers? I just wanted to help you organize them." I felt my lips curve into a faint smile. "Oh, sweetheart, you know me. I keep everything tidy. You don't have to worry." Her eyes flickered with something I recognized now: impatience. She wanted me to stumble, to confess where I kept it. But I wouldn't. Not anymore. As she left the room, I turned back to the phone on my nightstand. The camera's green dot glowed faintly, almost like an ally winking at me. They thought they were the hunters. But I was starting to realize maybe I wasn't the prey after all. Tomorrow, they would bring me the papers. Tomorrow, they expected me to give in. But tomorrow, I would begin writing a very different story. By Wednesday morning, the walls of my own home felt like they were closing in. I moved through the rooms as though walking across a battlefield. Every chair, every drawer, every memory carried weight. Emily's laughter echoed faintly in my mind, not from yesterday but from decades ago, her first birthday party, her teenage sleepovers, the day she moved her college boxes into the car. Those echoes collided brutally with the voice I'd heard through the camera only hours before: a one-bedroom apartment will be enough for her last years. Her last years. My daughter had said it like I was already gone. I sat at the kitchen table sipping lukewarm coffee when Emily entered, her hair perfectly styled, her smile stretched too wide. "Mom," she said gently, "don't you think this house is a bit too much for you? All these rooms, all this space. It's a lot to manage at your age." I forced my lips into a polite smile. "I've managed it for 30 years. I think I'll be fine." David appeared behind her, carrying a stack of envelopes. "We're just worried, Margaret. Big houses come with big responsibilities. What if you slipped on the stairs? What if you forgot to lock a door? A smaller place would be safer." Safer. That word twisted like a knife. They weren't worried about my safety, they were worried about their payday. I excused myself and went to the laundry room, but instead of folding clothes I pulled out my phone and opened the camera feed again. This time, I left it running while I busied myself. On the screen, I watched them sit in the living room. Emily leaned forward, her elbows on her knees, her voice sharp. "Albert says the sooner we get the deed, the sooner we can put the house on the market. $500,000, David. Imagine what that means for us. We could finally move out of this old neighborhood, start fresh, invest in something real." David nodded, flipping through one of my bank statements. "Exactly. We sell, we pocket the profit, and she moves into a retirement home. Something affordable but comfortable. Retirement home." They said it casually, like it was a reasonable option. But I could hear the calculation underneath: strip me of my home, confine me in a place with a single bed, all while they reaped the rewards of my labor. Emily's voice softened, but her words were worse than knives. "She'll be fine there. Meals prepared, nurses on call. She won't even need to cook. Honestly, it'll be better for her. Better for me." As if ripping me from the very walls I'd built with my bare hands was some kind of gift. David stretched his legs across the rug, his tone pragmatic. "We just have to keep her calm. She's sentimental, but she's also gullible. If we tell her it's about updating her will, she'll sign. She trusts you. You're her daughter. Play that card." I gripped the edge of the laundry counter until my knuckles turned white. Play that card. My love, my lifetime of trust, reduced to a trick. Emily let out a soft laugh, the kind I used to adore. "It's almost funny. All those years she drilled responsibility into me, and now I get to use it against her. She taught me how to handle documents, how to read contracts, how to be thorough. And that's exactly why she won't see it coming." I nearly dropped the phone. My own lessons. My own values. Twisted into weapons to steal everything from me. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My chest tightened, my vision blurred. I sat down heavily on the washing machine, clutching the phone. The betrayal was so complete, so absolute, it felt like I was losing my mind. But then, something inside me shifted. The tears dried, replaced by a cold clarity. If Emily had inherited my sharpness, my persistence, then she had underestimated one thing: I was still alive, and I was still capable of fighting back. Later that evening, as we sat together for dinner, Emily slid a casserole dish across the table with a smile too polished to be real. "Mom, don't you ever dream of a simpler life? Somewhere smaller, cozier. No more big bills, no more endless upkeep. I spooned potatoes onto my plate, keeping my tone even. I suppose one day I might. But for now, I like having room. This house feels like home. David cut into his chicken, his eyes narrowing slightly. Sometimes clinging to the past keeps us from moving forward. I met his gaze and held it. And sometimes clinging to the past is the only way to remember who you are. The silence that followed was thick, but I forced myself to smile, acting as though I hadn't just declared war in the subtlest way possible. After dinner, when they retreated to their room, I slipped back into the kitchen, phone in hand. On the screen, I watched them whisper furiously, their words too low for the camera to catch. But I didn't need to hear. I knew what they were planning. Tomorrow, they would come armed with documents. Tomorrow, they would try to bury me alive with ink on paper. And tomorrow, I would be ready. That night, I sat in my bedroom with the lamp off, the glow of my phone illuminating the darkness. The camera feeds blinked back at each angle of my home captured in eerie silence. Emily and David's door was closed, but the faint hum of their voices carried through the walls. I couldn't make out the words, but I didn't need to. I knew what they were plotting, how to corner me, how to trick me, how to rob me. I pressed my phone to my chest and whispered to myself, if they think I'm weak, then weak is exactly what I'll give them. For years, I had taught my nursing students one golden rule: sometimes you have to let the patient believe they're in control, even when you're guiding every step. It struck me then this wasn't so different. Emily and David wanted to see a confused old woman, gullible and compliant. Fine. I would be their perfect patient. I would smile, nod, and shuffle papers with trembling hands. All while gathering the proof to end their little charade. The next morning, I prepared breakfast like always. Scrambled eggs, toast, coffee. My hands didn't shake as I slid the plates across the table, but I let them think they did. Emily noticed. She glanced at David, smirking faintly. "Mom, you seem tired," she said sweetly. "Maybe you should rest more. Too much stress isn't good at your age." I laughed lightly, as if embarrassed. "Oh, you're probably right, honey. I forget sometimes that I'm not 30 anymore." David leaned back in his chair, satisfied. They believed it. They were already weaving the narrative: fragile mother, failing memory, too old to manage her own life. After breakfast, I retreated to my room under the pretense of a nap. Instead, I unlocked the drawer where I kept my backup USB drive. With careful fingers, I copied the video files from my phone to the small device. Every word they had spoken in the living room, every mention of Albert, every plan to sell my house site was all there, stored like dynamite waiting for a match. But one copy wasn't enough. I plugged the USB into my laptop and emailed the files to a private account I had set up years ago, back when online scams started to scare me. Now it would be my insurance. If anything happened to me, if Emily or David somehow got to my phone, those emails would speak for me. When I finally emerged, Emily was sitting on the couch with a folder on her lap. She looked up, her smile bright but her eyes hard. "Mom, we've been talking. We think it's time to update some of your paperwork. You know, just in case." My heart pounded, but I forced my lips into a trusting smile. "Of course, sweetheart. You know best. Why don't we go over it tomorrow? I'd like a clear head before I sign anything." David frowned, but Emily touched his arm. "Tomorrow's fine," she said smoothly. Then she turned back to me. "We'll make it simple for you. Just a few signatures, nothing complicated." "Thank you, dear," I murmured. "I always appreciate how you take care of me." The words tasted like ash in my mouth, but they landed exactly as I wanted them to. Emily beamed, convinced she was already winning. That evening, while they watched television in the living room, I slipped outside with my phone pressed to my ear. My fingers shook as I dialed the number scribbled in the back of an old notebook: Detective Johnson, a retired police officer who lived 2 streets away. He had once helped a neighbor after a burglary, and I'd saved his contact just in case. Mrs. Wilson. His voice was rough, cautious. Detective, I whispered, glancing over my shoulder at the lit windows of my house. I need your help. It's about my daughter and son-in-law. They're trying to steal my home. There was a pause, then a steady reply, tell me everything. I did. I told him about the cameras, the recordings, the conversations about Albert, the forged documents. He didn't interrupt once. When I finished, I could hear him tapping a pen on his desk. You've done the right thing, he said finally. Keep acting normal. Don't confront them yet. I'll contact a lawyer who specializes in elder protection. Between the recordings and your testimony, we can build a case. But you need more direct evidence, something that proves their intent beyond doubt. What kind of evidence? Get them to spell it out. Talk about the forgery, the retirement home, the money. Make them admit it in plain words. Then we can move. My throat tightened. You're asking me to sit across from my daughter while she plots to ruin me. I'm asking you to let her expose herself. You're stronger than you think, Mrs. Wilson. When I hung up, I felt a strange mixture of dread and determination. The stage was being set, but I was no longer just a victim. I was preparing my own performance. Inside, I found Emily and David laughing at a sitcom, as though nothing sinister lurked beneath their smiles. I lowered myself into my favorite armchair, forcing a weary sigh. You know, I said casually, tomorrow after lunch would be a good time to look at those papers. I'll make tea. We can take our time. Emily's eyes sparkled with triumph. David grinned. Perfect, he said. We'll bring everything. As they turned back to the TV, I folded my hands in my lap, hiding the fierce resolve that burned in my chest. Let them think tomorrow would be their victory. Tomorrow, the trap would spring. The next day dawned bright and deceptively calm. The September sun spilled across the kitchen counters, golden and warm, as if the world outside had no idea what storm was about to break inside my home. I moved slowly, carefully, boiling water for tea, setting out cups and saucers, placing a plate of butter cookies in the center of the dining table. It all looked like any other quiet afternoon. But inside me, nerves and resolve clashed like fire and steel. At exactly 2 o'clock, Emily and David came into the kitchen carrying a thick folder. I caught the glint of satisfaction in Emily's eyes as she laid it down in front of me. Here we are, Mom, she said gently, as though she were offering me a birthday gift. Just a few things to sign, so everything will be in order. David opened the folder and spread the papers across the table, arranging them with deliberate precision. These are simple documents, he explained. Power of attorney, medical authorization, updating your will. It's all for your own security. My hands hovered over the papers, but I didn't touch them. The words blurred together, lines of legal jargon in tiny print. Even without reading, I could see terms that made my stomach tighten: irrevocable, transfer, assignment of rights. I forced my voice to tremble. It all looks complicated. I don't really understand. Emily reached across the table, patting my hand. That's why we're here, Mom. To help. You don't need to read every line. Just trust us. It's standard paperwork. Albert handled everything. There it was, his name again. Albert. The puppet master in the shadows. David picked up a pen and placed it by my elbow. All you need to do is sign here, here, and here. He tapped 3 neat X's on the pages. I swallowed hard and picked up the pen. My fingers trembled, though not from fear anymore. From rage. What's the rush? I asked softly. Why do I need to sign today? David's jaw tightened. Because Albert scheduled our appointment for tomorrow morning. If we don't bring the signed documents, we'll lose the opportunity. The opportunity for what? I asked, letting my eyes meet his. Emily's smile wavered. For peace of mind, Mom. For stability. Don't you want to know everything is secure for your last years? Her last years. The phrase echoed again, poisonous and cruel. I laid the pen down deliberately. I think I'd like to read them carefully first. I've always been thorough, haven't I? David's mask cracked. His voice sharpened. Mom, this isn't necessary. It's just legal red tape. You don't have the time or the knowledge to pick apart every paragraph. I sat back in my chair, folding my hands. Then I suppose I don't have the time to sign, either. The silence that followed was sharp enough to slice air. Emily's smile froze, her knuckles white against the edge of the table. David leaned forward, his face darkening. Mom, he said, his voice low but trembling with suppressed fury, we need you to cooperate. Don't make this difficult. The word, cooperate, hit me like a slap. My own daughter and her husband weren't asking, they were demanding. I kept my tone light, almost amused. I don't see why signing a pile of papers should be urgent, unless, of course, you have something to hide. Emily's composure shattered. Her voice rose. Why are you being so suspicious? Don't you trust us? We've lived with you, taken care of you, helped you with everything, and this is how you treat us. I met her anger with calm. Trust is earned, Emily. And lately, I've had reason to wonder what you're really taking care of. David slammed his palm against the table, rattling the cups. Enough. Sign the papers, or, he stopped himself, but the threat hung heavy in the air. I leaned forward, my voice steady for the first time in days. Or what, David? You'll sell my house. Lock me away in a retirement home. Tell the world I'm too senile to know what I'm doing. Their eyes widened, shock breaking across their faces. For the first time, they realized I wasn't as blind as they believed. Emily stammered, What are you talking about? I pointed to the papers. These aren't for my protection. They're for yours. They give you power over everything I own. My bank accounts. My home. Even my medical care. You think I don't know? I may be old, but I'm not a fool. The color drained from Emily's face. David tried to recover, forcing a laugh. Mom, you've got it all wrong. These are just precautions. No, I interrupted, my voice rising. These are chains. And you expect me to clasp them around my own wrists. The room went still. For the first time, I saw fear in Emily's eyes. Not guilt, not remorse, fear. Because she knew the performance was unraveling. David broke the silence with a snarl. We've given you everything. We've stayed here, made your life easier, and this is the thanks we get? You're ungrateful, paranoid, delusional. I pushed the papers back toward him, my hand steady. If protecting myself makes me ungrateful, then I'll wear the title proudly. He shoved back his chair so hard it screeched against the tile. Emily reached for his arm, hissing, Not now. We'll handle it another way. Her voice trembled, but her eyes burned with calculation. I stood, meeting them both with a level gaze. I've lived in this house for 3 decades. I raised my daughter here. I buried my husband here. And I will not sign away my life because you're too impatient to build your own. For a moment, none of us moved. The weight of the words lingered like smoke. Then Emily gathered the papers with shaking hands, shoving them back into the folder. This isn't over, she whispered. I smiled, a small, fierce curve of my lips. You're right. It isn't. They stormed out of the kitchen, their voices erupting in hushed, furious tones behind their closed door. I sat back down, breathing hard, my body trembling from the confrontation. But inside, beneath the fear, something stronger had taken root. For the first time, I felt the shift. The prey had looked her hunters in the eye. And the hunters didn't like what they saw. After the confrontation, the house was quiet in a way that felt like holding breath. Their doors slammed shut and muffled voices became a whining background noise. I set the kettle on the stove and sat very still, letting the steam fog my glasses as if that could blur the memory of their faces. I needed proof. Not just suspicion, not just a twinge of betrayal. I needed words, plain and damning, that even the cleverest lawyer couldn't twist away. I called Detective Johnson back and told him what had happened, the folder, the signatures, David's outburst. He didn't hesitate. "Bring me everything you've already got," he said. "And tomorrow, act like nothing's changed. Tell them you'll sign. Invite them to go over the papers again. Let them think you're folding." He arranged for a technician to come by under the pretense of checking our smoke detectors. The technician was discreet, calm. He installed a tiny recorder and a pair of microscopic cameras in the living room and dining area where they always spread papers. He walked me through how the recorder worked, where to hide it in my blouse so it wouldn't be obvious, and how to trigger the camera feed without them seeing. He was efficient, clinical, the opposite of the messy emotions ragging at my chest. That night, I slept little. I lay awake thinking of Emily at 5 with pigtailed hair, at 12 with braces, at 20 with a gleam of independence in her eyes. All the years condensed into moments, the lectures on responsibility, the nights I covered her when she made bad choices, the slow contented pride I had felt watching her find her way. It became incomprehensible that those memories had been repurposed into blueprints for my ruin. Morning came with brittle, painful clarity. I moved carefully, performing the little rituals that made up our household theater. I put on a sweater, I fluffed the throw pillow in the living room, I pretended not to notice the sharpness in their voices when they passed one another in the hallway. I let them see the Margaret they expected, a little forgetful, a little frail, trusting. But inside, I carried the device snug against my skin like an amulet. They arrived with the papers as predicted, confident and smiling in the way people do when they think they own a script. Emily set the folder down with theatrical care. "Mom, today's the day," she said, her voice soft as honey. David sat opposite me, the pen poised like a ceremonial dagger. "Why don't we go through it together?" I suggested, sounding small and agreeable. "I want to understand what I'm signing." Emily's smile grew. "Perfect. Let's do it." They started reading, I let them. They summarized the clauses in slow, easy tones, pointing to lines and reassuring me with a practiced touch. "This just lets us help manage your affairs," Emily explained. "It's so you don't have to worry." Her hand brushed mine. For a heartbeat I almost believed it. Then David leaned forward, his voice lowering. "Once this is done, it's clean. Albert guarantees it. The house transfers, title in our name, and it's as if nothing happened. It's the fastest way." The technician had told me the recorder would pick up everything within a few feet. I felt the tiny weight under my blouse, the microphone's promise a steady heat against my ribs. I forced my face into that expression I'd practiced, the smile of the elderly woman who trusts too much. "And you promise," I prompted, soft and cooing, "that this is just for my protection?" David's eyes narrowed with irritation, and in that instant he forgot his careful script. "We promise whatever you need to believe, Margaret," he snapped. "But between us, Albert needs the original. He needs to match the paper, compare handwriting. Without it, the registry won't accept the transfer. He's got someone there who can fast-track the records, but he needs proof." Emily chimed in, voice low and deliberate. "We're doing this for our future, for the kids we want to have. We've been scraping by. This house is the only ticket out. You know we're good people, but sometimes you have to take opportunities when they come." They spoke openly now, as if the recorder was part of the furniture they'd ignored. David added, careless and cruel, "And if she resists? We tell her it's for insurance, or we'll update. She doesn't read this stuff. She'll just sign." There it was. Plain as daylight. Intent spelled out in ordinary conversation. The words poured from theme: confession of motive, a confession of plan. My chest tightened so much that I thought I might not be able to breathe, but I forced myself to remain still on the outside, to let them reveal themselves further. They joked about timelines, about Albert's fee, about selling the house and splitting the money. Emily even laughed once, a brittle sound that rang too loud in the quiet room. $500,000. Do you understand what that would mean for us? David reached back under the table, and my pulse leapt in terror. Had he found a camera? But no, his hand returned empty. He was only straightening his sleeve, satisfied and oblivious. They had laid out every detail like a rehearsal, and in their arrogance they had forgotten they were creating a paper trail, one my recorder would carry straight to Detective Johnson. When Emily began to question whether we should make the transfer sooner than planned, David's tone hardened. We'll pressure her. We'll cut back on extras: no grocery runs, no rides to the doctor. She'll feel it financially. She'll come to us. She always has. The recorder captured it all. Motive, method, malice. No lawyer could wave that away without admitting their clients had sat down and planned it like criminals. After an hour of casual cruelty jokes about my memory, thinly veiled contempt for my routines, they gathered the papers. Emily's hand brushed mine in a faux comfort. Don't worry, Mom, she said. We're doing this for you. We both stood. I kept my voice light, but my heart had the rhythm of a drum calling for justice. Thank you, I said softly. Do whatever's best. They left, triumphant in their certainty. I waited until the front door closed and their footsteps faded, then I slipped into the living room and retrieved the recorder from my blouse. The file was a simple MP3, but what it contained was a map of betrayal. I copied it to the USB I'd hidden the week before and sent an encrypted message to Detective Johnson with a link to the recording. Within an hour, there was a quiet knock at the door. The detective stood there with a woman in a gray suit I recognized from the courthouse, an elder law attorney. Their faces were serious but relieved. Mrs. Wilson, the detective said, we heard everything. You did the right thing. I exhaled, a laugh of disbelief breaking from me, part hysteria, part relief. My house, my life, my memories had been laid bare in a tiny file. The trap had worked. The hunters had exposed themselves, and now the law could do its work. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something like peace. The cameras had borne witness. The truth had been named. And justice, patient and inevitable, was taking its first careful steps into my living room. The following afternoon, I set the table again with tea and cookies, the same way I had done before. Only this time, I wasn't trembling in fear. This time, I wasn't playing the fool. The recorder nestled beneath my blouse once more, but now it was a safety net, not a desperate gamble. The evidence had already been secured, delivered, and backed up in more places than Emily or David could ever erase. When they entered the kitchen, their smiles looked forced, a little too polished, a little too wide. Maybe they sensed a shift in me, maybe not. Emily carried the folder as though it were a golden ticket. David trailed behind, his jaw tight, his eyes glittering with impatience. Ready, Mom? Emily asked brightly, sliding the papers across the table. I sat down, smoothing my skirt. Of course, dear. Let's go through them one more time. Slowly. Her eyes flickered with irritation, but she complied, spreading the pages out like a dealer laying down cards. David placed the pen in front of me again, tapping it against the table with restless fingers. I held it between my fingers, staring at the line marked with a neat little X. Then I looked up, meeting both of their eyes. You know, I said quietly, I've been thinking about what these papers really mean. David's brow furrowed. Mom, don't start again. We've explained everything. Emily leaned forward, her tone still syrupy. It's for your protection. That's all. You don't have to worry. I cut her off. Protection? Is that what you call forging my signature, selling my house, and throwing me into a retirement home? The color drained from her face. David froze, his pen hovering midair. What are you talking about? Emily stammered. I laid the pen down deliberately. I'm talking about Albert. About the $500,000 you were drooling over. About how you were planning to cut off my medical insurance to pressure me. I heard every word. Their silence was thick, suffocating. David's mouth opened, then closed again, his mind scrambling for a plausible lie. Emily shook her head, her voice trembling. Mom, you must have misunderstood. No, my voice was strong now, steady as a steel beam. I didn't misunderstand. I recorded it. Every whisper, every cruel plan, every joke about my last years. David shot to his feet, his face twisted with rage. You spied on us, he roared. You set us up. I protected myself, I corrected, standing to. My heart pounded, but I didn't flinch. From the two people I should have been able to trust the most. The front door opened behind us. All three of us turned at once. Detective Johnson stepped in, flanked by two uniformed officers. Behind them came the attorney in gray, her briefcase in hand. The air shifted instantly, the room that had been my prison for weeks became a courtroom in miniature. Emily Wilson. David Miller, the detective announced calmly. You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted document forgery, and elder financial abuse. Emily gasped, staggering back into her chair. David's fists clenched, his face flushed crimson. This is insane, he shouted. She's making it up. She's paranoid, senile. The attorney laid a file on the table. We have high-definition recordings of you both detailing your plan. We have a sworn medical report confirming Mrs. Wilson's full mental capacity. And we have your own words, captured clearly on tape, admitting every part of your scheme. Emily's shoulders slumped, tears streaming down her cheeks. Mom, she whispered desperately, please. Don't let them do this. I'm your daughter. My throat tightened, but I held her gaze. You stopped being my daughter the moment you decided my life was worth more to you dead than alive. The moment you turned my love into leverage. This is the choice you made, Emily. David tried to bolt for the hallway, but one of the officers caught him by the arm, twisting his hands behind his back. The other officer moved to cuff Emily, who sobbed and shook, muttering denials that rang hollow in the heavy silence. As they were led toward the door, David twisted to glare at me, his voice thick with venom. You'll regret this, old woman. Without us, you're nothing. I straightened my back. Without you, I am free. The door slammed shut behind them. For the first time in months, the house was still truly still. No whispering behind doors, no fake smiles across the table, no threats hidden in sweet tones. Just silence. Blessed, liberating silence. The attorney gathered the papers, tucking them into her briefcase. You were brave, Mrs. Wilson, she said softly. Not many could have held their ground like you did. Detective Johnson tipped his hat. You've got grit. They underestimated the wrong woman. When they left, I sat in my favorite armchair, the same chair where I had rocked Emily as a child, where I had read her bedtime stories, where I had believed love was enough to shield us from the world. My chest ached, not with fear now, but with grief. Grief for the daughter I thought I knew, grief for the family that had rotted from the inside. But beneath the grief was something fiercer. Relief. Strength. A new kind of peace. 3 months later, Emily and David stood trial. The evidence was overwhelming, the recordings undeniable. They accepted a plea deal, time in prison, permanent renunciation of any claim to my property, or restraining order to keep them 500 feet away from me forever. Some neighbors asked if I regretted pressing charges against my only child. My answer was always the same. I regret that she forced me to choose. But I don't regret choosing myself. Because I had learned something the hard way, family is not defined by blood. It is defined by respect, by honesty, by love that doesn't come with strings attached. Now, when I walk through my house, I no longer hear whispers in the corners or footsteps in the hall. I hear only my own breath, steady and free. I open the curtains each morning and let the sun spill across the rooms I fought to protect. This home is mine. My life is mine. And no one, not even my own daughter, will ever take that from me again.